exciting stuff for us because the technology is actually working to have some social impact and benefiting their business at the same time. No surprise to someone who starts with my orientation that those two things relate, but great to see it in a way that companies see objective quantitative data, because that helps justify continuing movement in the area. So, just for fun, really quickly, I thought I'd promote some companies that aren't Textio. Last year, Textio took a look at every tech company on the internet and scored their jobs for gender bias. And we did a West Coast version, and it was very popular, and then we got a lot of requests from New York and Boston to do a similar post on Silicon Valley, so we did. It gives you an idea, not all of these companies are Textio customers, about half are. But these are the companies that statistically showed the least bias in their job listings when we did this about a year ago. We're actually about to rev this, and I'm interested in whether there's any change here. And now, super for fun, non-Textio related but same tech. Our customers are always surprising us with what they're using Textio for. So as you saw, it's basically a word processor. It happens to be hyper-optimized for talent. Go back to reading all the results. I should have introduced it first.
Too late.
In fact, like one of the things we first were in beta early last year, I got an email from a professor of material science at San Jose State, did not know him, and he was like, I found your beta, this is amazing, I used it for all my course syllabi. So I wrote him back and was like, how could that have been good for you? Because we trained this on job posts. What were you trying to do? Tell me your experience. He's like, oh, I ignored all the job stuff, and I just used the bias pieces because I wanted to draw more women into my classes. Interesting. And so we pay attention. We have a bunch of dot classifiers that look at what people are trying to do with Textio. They look at their marketing content through, they put their emails through, they put everything through, mainly to see the bias piece, right? Because that's a horizontal piece, even though it's trained on a highly vertical corpus. So we thought a few months ago, this was March, this was about 6 months ago now, we thought, what's the most interesting text in the world right now? What's the most interesting language in the world right now that everyone's talking about? And we decided that maybe presidential speech transcripts and debates were very interesting to the world right now. So we followed what our users would do, and we took a bunch of presidential transcripts and debate transcripts and speeches and threw them into Textio and wanted to know what we find. What we found was really interesting. So there were 5 candidates left in the race at this point that we did this analysis. So Clinton and Trump, of course, but Sanders, Cruz, and Rubio were also still active as candidates at this time. Found some really fascinating things. You can kind of see there on the right the top phrases that had any gender coding at all in Textio as they showed up in each candidate's speeches. So Hillary Clinton's top phrases were all feminine. You can see Trump and Rubio had a little bit of a mix, and Sanders and Cruz were masculine. But some really interesting things showed up. First of all of the candidates told at least 3 times as many stories about men as they did about women. And these are stories like my uncle taught me the value of keeping a job, or I met a truck driver in Tallahassee last week who told me he can't pay his mortgage. Whatever anecdotes they come up with on the trail, over 3 times as many were about men. Ted Cruz had 18 times as many about men as women. Let's get political, but it's fascinating. 4 times more stories about fathers and mothers. Other than Hillary Clinton, with one example at that time of an anecdote that was about a woman who wasn't her mother, 100%, and this was many hundreds of thousands of words of transcript and debate, 100% of the anecdotes about parents at all were about their own mothers. So in fact, the only woman that Rubio talked about at all was his mother. She gets a lot of play in his speeches at the time. So really, really interesting. The New York Times wrote up a piece on this that you could dig up and cover in more detail, which was kind of a fun piece for us. Militaristic metaphors were everywhere. Hillary Clinton had slightly fewer of them than the other candidates. For those of you who may be of a political bent, Sanders had just as many as the Republican men. It just that the things he said he wanted to totally destroy or hunt down were more like the wage gap and less like ISIS. But the actual verbs in play were the same. The means of communication were the same. So it was kind of interesting, and for us, it was a fun way to see how to apply the tech that we built to interesting text in the world and see what turned out. That's some things. Just very quickly wrap up, and we have some questions if people have time. What happens when you measure isn't always what you expect. So you might think, like, look, I've measured this and I've demonstrated this result. People are like, wow, I totally get it. Actually, people mostly don't get it. They're very surprised. Anyone who's been a linguist in this room knows people are very unintuitive about language. Very unintuitive about language. In fact, the kind of thing that draws someone into linguistics might be a slightly better than average intuition about language in the first place. But you'll say to people, when you use the word manage, you actually do attract about 10 times as many men as women. Whereas if you use the word lead, you attract a mix of both. And if you use the word develop to describe your team, you'll attract slightly more women. No, you don't. No, you don't. No, actually, you do. People really resist to the things that they hang on to, and it often takes a lot of data to show them that and to show it in their own data set. One thing I kind of underdwell on in the demo, as you can see for us, it's not enough just to show how a document is going to perform. We want to tell you why. Conventional machine learning techniques are not good at this, right? You can build a model, you can take a bunch of docs and you can tag outcomes to them and you can say, what's going to happen? Is this job going to fill fast or not? Or is this going to attract a lot of women or not? But they're not very good at telling you why something's going to happen. And of course, if you're making a commercial application and not doing academic research, it's really important that you tell people why, right? They want to be able to use your product to improve. They don't want to just go, okay, now what do I do? And so, for us, the way that we've sort of built phrase classes, the way we've organized the feedback that people get within the product is very much with a focus on the explication, telling you not only what's going to happen, but how you might change it, how you might change it, and then of course you want to see that reflected in the score that Textio gives you, and then you need to see it reflected in your actual metrics when you collect applicant metrics. But I think what is really interesting from a research perspective, why is what people want in a real product, and something most, I think, machine learning applications have not succeeded with yet. And then, results improve when you measure. I'm a big measurement person. Part of how I got started in looking at gender in tech is that I was in tech, and using data, using quantitative approaches resonates with a skeptical tech crowd more than this is my experience. This happens. Well, here's 100,000 documents, and we can just lay it down and look at it together. So that's pretty much what I have, but I'm happy to take questions. Yeah.
I'm curious. Thank you, first of all.
Yeah.
This is wonderful. And I've been looking at my US stuff between
Thank you.
Hopefully I didn't misrepresent. I'm curious about the second bullet in here. What does NLP refer to?
Pulling out the linguistic patterns that correlate to certain outcomes, right? So I think a lot of text applications of NLP look at n-grams, maybe to varying counts of n, varying degrees of complexity, but not a lot have tried to find deeper linguistic predictors, right? So when we look at the interaction of your bullet count and your active and passive verbs. By the way those factors interact, it turns out, is really important for a job listing. We look at much more nuanced linguistic factors. There are hundreds that Textio evaluates and measures. The other thing that's sort of a key part of our pipeline is what I call opportunities before. So understanding a word or a phrase in its linguistic context, and then rapidly generating alternatives that can still make sense in the context. And then, of course, you only want to surface the ones that are going to improve the document performance. There's a lot of NLP in the assessment of the context and in generating the alternatives. Good question. Yeah.
When you changed the ideal candidate to you, it looked like the score went from 54 to 56 and then to 57. Do you have multiple levels of scoring going on?
Yes, there are multiple levels of scoring going on, and it's all of the scoring is relative to everything else on the screen at the time. So because you're moving a piece of text, right? Just think of a simple thing. Word count, it turns out, matters in a job post. You want it to be between 350 and 700 words for optimally. Very simple. Changing the ideal candidate from you does make that semantic change, but it also changes word count, right? As a simple example. So when you move one piece of text on the screen in response to a particular factor or feedback, you may be changing other things at the same time. So the score is working in a couple of different levels of success. Yeah.
In your process of building your algorithms, how important is that final match between the hired candidate who's been hired and the resume and the actual job posting? Are you seeing a correlation between those two?
Yeah, and that's kind of what I showed a piece of that with the gender outcome, where there's a strong predictive correlation. There are a lot of other dimensions we can talk about that aren't bias specific where we see a strong correlation. But the specific metrics that we look at most, just from having learned across a large data set, are demographic mix of candidates coming in the door, because although it's interesting what happens at later stages, the company's own interview process can mess with those outcomes a lot, right? What Textio can make a promise to you about is your inbound, because that's what we control, is your inbound. We look at the overall time to fill because it's so closely correlated with your inbound. And then we look at the percentage of candidates who get through that first screen. Like, were they basically good or not, for the job? Did you just get people, or did you get really people who can do the role? So those are the three we look at most. There are other things. The score takes dozens of factors into account, weighted differently depending on the job type, the title. For example, someone hiring a software engineer cares a lot about the qualification level of applicants coming through the door, much more than they care about the number of applicants coming through the door. If you're at Amazon hiring fulfillment center staff seasonally, you actually mostly just care about the number of applicants because you expect it's going to be a high turnover job. So the thing that predicts your success the most is, did you get 500 people for this position or just 2? Because it's such a churn, hire they leave. So you just need that backlog of people. So the score weights factors differently depending on the job type. Next.
I believe you said something about the gender model not being binary in this, and I see the leaning more towards people, masculine and feminine, and this sort of spectrum in your UI. But I was wondering about, just gender identification through your input data and how that might work, not being binary.
So we only use what candidates provide about themselves. We don't attempt to infer anything from a resume because that's notorious. I would show this man. It's notoriously broken. And so we only, when candidates, kind of backed up because most aren't in recruiting. What typically happens when people apply for a job at a large company is they not only give their resume, but they frequently have the option of providing a bunch of demographic data about themselves. Okay. The two that are most frequently provided are gender, probably because many people feel it can be inferred anyway, if that's not necessarily true. So gender is often provided, it's why we started there in the UI, and military veteran status, because veterans tend to be very proud. So they tend to say, yep, I served, I'm a veteran. So you get a very clear data signal. Ethnicity, race, the least likely to be provided a standard set, followed by sexuality, and age is kind of in the middle. We actually have a pretty clear signal on age now, because candidates, again, many people I think falsely assume it can be inferred by things like their graduation dates, and so as a result, they often just provided. So we just work off of what's candidate provided, we don't try to guess. And so our input is as good as the data collection. About 2/3 of job candidates in the United States provide some amount of demographic information. Yeah.
So the example that you showed was specific to tech positions or just in general, also targeting men or female first?
The Amazon example?
Yeah.
There's some of each. So the guidance that you get, there is some that applies across many, many job types, and there's some that differs by the industry and the job type.
Okay. Got it. Yeah, that was going to be my question. How does the tool either look different or work differently? How do you customize based on based on a company's goals? So whether it's to hire for diversity in race or for Amazon, the qualifications.
So the platform doesn't look different at all. The guidance that you get under the covers may be different. Again, if you know kind of, but every company sort of thinks they're a special snowflake, but basically no one is, right? And again, in general, if you're